Few kings in human history have left a legacy as tainted by evil as Rome's second emperor, Tiberius Caesar Augustus. What started out as the rule of a well-behaved general turned into a bizarre nightmare that would shock even his most corrupt rivals. The stories that emerged from his self-imposed exile on the island of Capri paint a portrait so disturbing that historians still debate whether they could possibly be true. Yet the consistency of ancient accounts, particularly those of Suetonius and Tacitus, suggests that behind the marble facades of imperial power lurked a darkness that defies comprehension. Tonight, we delve into the abyss of one man's corruption. Absolute power not only corrupted completely, but it also produced a monster with limitless desires. When Tiberius assumed power in 14 AD, Rome expected competence from this proven general. But beneath his stern exterior, darkness already stirred. Personal tragedies, his brother's death, forced divorce from beloved Vipania, and marriage to Augustus's promiscuous daughter Julia, festered in his soul, creating wounds that would eventually tear open. For a decade, he governed adequately, maintaining Augustus's policies and imperial stability. Yet those close to him detected growing bitterness and cynicism. His son Drusus's death in 23 AD, possibly by poison, marked the turning point. Grief-stricken and paranoid, Tiberius began withdrawing from public life. In 26 AD, he made the fateful decision to retreat to Capri. Ostensibly seeking respite from governance, he actually constructed a private kingdom where his darkest fantasies could flourish. 12 villas rose across the island, each hiding secrets that terrorized servants. Real power now emanated from this fortress of depravity. The emperor's sexual appetites had twisted into something monstrous, targeting the innocent and defenseless. Children were brought to Capri under false pretenses, never leaving unchanged. Some were trained as minnows, taught to swim between his legs in grotesque aquatic games. Suetonius describes elaborate sexual performances where young people were forced into acts while Tiberius watched, creating what he called chains. Perhaps most disturbing were the spintrii, young sex slaves trained in particular acts. These children, stolen or sold by desperate parents, existed solely for the emperor's pleasure. Many died in service. Survivors were murdered to ensure silence. The corruption spread through accomplices. Young nobles offered siblings to curry favor. Officials became procurers, feeding an economy built on human flesh. Those showing moral qualms faced treason charges, making participation a survival mechanism. Beyond sexual depravity lay broader sadism. Tiberius delighted in psychological torture, granting reprieves only to execute prisoners days later. Parents watched their children die, then were forced to maintain normal social appearances. The treason trials became his primary terror weapon. Any word or gesture could mean death. The Senate devolved into terrified sycophants competing in servility. Senators executed colleagues on flimsy evidence, knowing mercy marked them as next victims. Some chose suicide over trial. Even natural death offered no escape. The emperor prosecuted the dead, seizing estates and destroying memorials. Roman society's fabric unraveled under this terror. Trust evaporated as anyone could be an informer. Intellectual life withered in the toxic atmosphere. The emperor himself became physically grotesque, his face covered in sores, wearing wigs and makeup to hide his decay. Administration fell to Sejanus, the ambitious Praetorian prefect, until Tiberius suddenly turned on him in 31 AD. The purge claimed hundreds, including children. One young girl was raped before execution because virgins couldn't legally be killed. Tiberius's final years saw madness intensify. Obsessed with death omens while courting danger, he made terrifying mainland forays that devastated communities scrambling to hide their young from his predatory gaze. When death came on March 16, 37 AD, Rome erupted in celebration. "To the Tiber with Tiberius," crowds shouted, demanding his body be thrown in the river like a criminal. The Senate initially refused deification. The historical debate continues. Some argue ancient sources exaggerated, pointing to continued imperial stability. But the volume and consistency of testimony plus genuine contemporary terror suggest the essential horror was real. Romans had learned their emperor could be a monster, knowledge that poisoned ruler-subject relationships for generations. Modern analysis might diagnose multiple disorders, but clinical terms fail to capture the full horror of unlimited power, unleashing every dark impulse. Tiberius represents what happens when civilization's restraints are removed from someone already inclined toward cruelty. The structural problems that enabled one man's character to determine millions' fate remained unchanged. Rome had created a system producing monsters alongside occasional good emperors. The precedent set, treason trials, informers, family punishment would be revived by subsequent tyrants. For the victims, there was no posthumous justice. The children of Capri, tortured senators, destroyed families, their suffering went unrecorded except as statistics. The moral wound inflicted on Roman society took generations to heal, if ever. Archaeological evidence provides little confirmation, though absence of evidence doesn't disprove the accounts. Tiberius had means and motive to destroy physical traces of his crimes. The economic paradox remains striking. Despite terror and corruption, Rome's economy stayed stable. Trade continued, taxes flowed, infrastructure maintained. This disconnect shows how complex systems function even under monstrous leadership, raising uncomfortable questions about complicity. International ramifications extended beyond Rome. Allied kingdoms questioned whether the empire represented superior culture or organized brutality. Moral authority was severely undermined. Future expansion faced increased resistance from peoples who'd heard the Capri stories. The gender dynamics deserve special attention. Women and children's vulnerability in Roman society made them easy targets. Stories of violated priestesses and enslaved noblewomen represent particular threads of horror throughout the reign. Religious implications troubled Romans who believed Tiberius's perversions angered the gods. Natural disasters were interpreted as divine wrath. Mystery cults went underground rather than risk perversion for imperial pleasure. The role of enablers, procurers, guards, informers, courtiers deserves condemnation. Each made choices to participate in evil for personal gain. These secondary monsters often escaped punishment, melting back into society with ill-gotten gains. Tiberius's death brought relief, but no real resolution. His successor Caligula proved imperial madness wasn't unique. The best that could be said was future tyrants rarely matched his particular fusion of administrative competence and personal depravity. As tourists now flock to Capri's beauty, few consider its horror. The sanitization of history risks forgetting real human suffering. Every stunning cliff view was also a potential murder scene. The island's beauty remains forever tainted. In final assessment, Tiberius demonstrates evil's banality alongside its horror. Between atrocities, empire business continued. Merchants traded, farmers planted, soldiers drilled. This normality existing with nightmare shows how societies accommodate almost anything. The fundamental questions transcend historical specifics. How do humans become capable of such evil? What systems enable individual depravity? Why do good people fail to resist? These matter as warnings. The conditions creating Tiberius can emerge in any era. History judges him not just as a bad emperor, but as fundamentally evil, proof that power without conscience produces monsters. His name became synonymous with perversion, remaining so 2,000 years later. Yet the most important lesson concerns not him but us. He was enabled by thousands choosing compliance over resistance, survival over virtue. Evil on such scale is never one monster's work, but a monstrous system ordinary people allow to function. In this complicity lies both horror and warning. Civilization is fragile. The veneer of law and morality can crack under pressure. Tiberius represents what emerges when that veneer shatters completely. His reign stands as history's darkest warning about unchecked authority and the depths of evil within human hearts. May we never forget, lest we repeat these horrors. The price of civilization is eternal vigilance against the darkness within ourselves and our societies. The tourists who now admire Capri's sunsets walk where children once screamed. The marble facades of power that once concealed such darkness remind us that evil can flourish behind civilization's most beautiful masks. In every age, the potential for such monsters exists, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. Tiberius died despised and alone, his empire traumatized but enduring. The human spirit he tried to break ultimately survived. In this tension between evil and resilience lies both history's horror and its hope. We study his reign not from morbid fascination, but as vaccination against tyranny, exposing ourselves to evil's reality so we might recognize and resist it when it next appears. For in the end, Tiberius's greatest crime was not just the lives he destroyed, but the trust he shattered, the hope he poisoned, the faith in human decency he corrupted. Yet even his monstrous example serves a purpose, teaching us that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, that power must be checked, and that ordinary people's choices determine whether civilization rises or falls into darkness. The island paradise still echoes with ancient screams, but it also whispers a crucial truth. Monsters are mortal, evil passes, but the lessons written in victims' blood must never be forgotten. This is Tiberius's final service to humanity, not as emperor, but as eternal warning of what we must never again allow to flourish.